what if the empty vacuum of space is just a massive lie? Like, what if the Earth isn't actually falling around the sun in this, silent freezing void, but is
And
actually...
is actually floating in this raging, completely invisible cosmic hurricane.
Exactly. I mean, it completely upends, well, basically everything we think we know about reality.
It really does. We are so accustomed to categorizing the universe into just two distinct buckets, right? Like the physical objects we can see and the completely empty nothingness that separates them.
Right, the empty space. But today, we are asking you to just, throw those buckets completely out the window.
Yep, completely out the window.
We're taking you on a journey into the fundamental nature of our universe by diving into a really provocative 2026 paper by Sriman Barua. It's titled Proof of Floating Matter Flowing Medium with Universal Implications.
Quite a title.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but our mission for this deep dive is to basically stage a rigorous head-to-head conceptual debate between two wildly opposing viewpoints that are presented in the text.
Because we were looking at, honestly, the ultimate clash of paradigms here.
Right. So on one side of the ring is what the paper labels the mainstream explanation.
Which is the standard cosmology you probably learned in school, right?
Yeah.
So Newtonian and Einsteinian gravity operating in a universe that is fundamentally an empty vacuum.
And then on the other side, we have the absolute medium model, or the AM model for short.
Right.
This framework argues that the universe is not empty in the slightest. It claims space is completely filled with an unseen, flowing baseline fluid.
Which is a huge mental leap.
It is. Now, before we get too deep into the cosmic weeds here, I want to be super clear with you listening. Our goal today is not to declare a winner or, endorse one side over the other.
Exactly. We're not taking sides.
We are just here to objectively examine the arguments, unpack the math, and look at the data from this source material. We just want to explore how these two vastly different models attempt to explain the exact same universe you and I live in.
And to do that properly, we really have to start at the foundation of how things move. And, well, in astrophysics, that means talking about gravity.
Okay, let's unpack this, because standard gravity is something we all just accept, right? But when you really think about it, it's pretty bizarre.
It is. I mean, in the mainstream view, space is empty. Gravity is treated as this invisible action at a distance.
Right. You have two isolated bodies, say, the Earth and the Sun, separated by millions of miles of literal nothingness, and somehow they just pull on each other. It's like magic.
The math of that pull is incredibly precise, of course, but conceptually, you're absolutely right. How does the information of that mass travel across a void?
Yeah, how does it know it's there?
Right. Standard physics uses the concept of bending space-time, but the AM model approaches this from a purely mechanical angle. The central postulate of the AM model is that space is a universal ocean. Yes, it is a highly compressible, non-linearly elastic fluid. In this view, matter doesn't actually move on its own through a void. Matter moves because it is physically carried by the currents of this absolute medium.
Okay, I need a mental picture for this, because that is a massive shift. If mainstream gravity is like throwing a heavy bowling ball onto a trampoline, causing the fabric to dip and pull surrounding marbles toward it.
Which is the classic textbook analogy, yeah.
Right, so the AM model sounds more like opening the drain in a bathtub full of water.
Oh, that is a phenomenal mechanical analogy.
So the rubber ducks floating in the water, the planets, in this case, don't move themselves, they don't have little engines, and they aren't mysteriously attracted to the drain itself.
Exactly.
They just float along with the water that is physically flowing into the vortex. But wait, I have to ask the skeptic's question here.
Go for it.
If space is a thick fluid, why doesn't the Earth experience friction? Like, why doesn't it slow down and just crash into the sun?
That is the exact hurdle the paper addresses through something called the nonlinear elasticity principle, or an LEP for short.
An LEP, okay.
So the Earth isn't an object pushing through a stagnant ocean. The ocean itself is moving. A massive object like the sun displaces this invisible medium, creating a strain.
Okay.
And because the fluid is elastic, it pushes back, creating a pressure gradient. That pressure drives the fluid inward, creating a massive spiraling sink flow.
Ah.
So the Earth isn't fighting a headwind, right? It's resting inside the current. Gravity isn't a fundamental force pulling you. Gravity is just hydrodynamic entrainment. You are simply being swept up in the flow.
Hydrodynamic entrainment, that definitely answers the physical concept, but, well, mainstream physics loves the inverse square law of gravity.
Absolutely.
The idea that the gravitational pull weakens by the square of the distance. Does this bathtub drain idea actually match that specific rigid math.
This is where the AM model claims a major theoretical victory. The paper breaks down how a fluid mechanically behaves when it rushes toward a central point.
Great.
It uses a mathematical process called rigorous volumetric integration.
Hold on, rigorous volumetric integration. You're going to have to give me the human translation for that one.
Fair enough. Imagine trying to understand a massive waterfall, but not by looking at the whole thing at once. You do it by mathematically slicing the water into millions of tiny individual 3D cubes.
Okay, slicing it up.
Yeah. You calculate the pressure and flow of each little cube to see how the entire massive system behaves. When the author does this for a compressible fluid flowing into a spherical sink like the sun, the inward acceleration naturally and perfectly spits out that one over r² scaling.
Wait, really? Just naturally?
Just naturally.
Yeah.
The inverse square law isn't some magical arbitrary rule of the universe.
Yeah.
It is literally just the natural geometric consequence of how fluid compresses as it gets squeezed into a smaller space in a steady vortex.
Wow. So it takes this abstract mathematical law and reveals it might just be pure fluid dynamics. But, you can't just have elegant math. Validating a theory against known planetary orbits is great, but a true scientific model has to explain the things that don't fit.
The anomalies, right?
Yeah. How do we test these fundamental differences in the real world?
We look for the cracks in the system. Real-world spacecraft that didn't behave the way standard equations predicted. The mainstream model has a couple of famous headaches.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. First, the Pioneer anomaly. Back in the late 20th century, the Pioneer 10 and 11 probes were leaving the solar system and they decelerated unexpectedly.
They just slowed down.
Right. They experienced this tiny, unexplained drag slowing them down. Second, we have the Earth flyby anomaly.
Slingshots.
Exactly. When spacecraft like Galileo or Rosetta performed gravitational slingshots around Earth to gain speed, they experienced strange, completely unpredicted velocity shifts.
So standard cosmology looks at these events and applies what the paper calls ad hoc patches.
Right. Bandages, basically.
For the Pioneer probes, the scientific consensus became thermal radiation. Basically, the idea is that the spacecraft's own heat was bouncing off its antenna and acting like a microscopic thruster pushing it backward.
Which is quite the workaround.
Yeah. And for the flybys, standard physics often attributes the weird velocity to unmodeled rotation effects of the Earth.
But the AM framework completely rejects those isolated patches. The paper argues that the Pioneer drag is not a heat reflection. It is literally the physical fluid resistance of the absolute medium.
A physical headwind.
Yes. As the medium flows regularly inward toward the sun, the outgoing spacecraft hits it. By measuring that exact deceleration, the AM model calculates the precise density of this medium at our distance from the sun.
Do they have a number for it?
They do. It comes out to 1.35 times 10 to the negative 13 kilograms per cubic meter.
That's incredibly specific. And what about the flybys? If Pioneer hit a headwind, what exactly happened to Galileo and Rosetta?
The flyby velocity shifts are explained as the azimuthal twist of the medium's vortex around the Earth.
Azimuthal twist. I'm guessing that means the sideways swirling motion, like the spin of a whirlpool, rather than just the downward suction.
You nailed it. As the medium flows into the Earth, it spirals. The spacecraft aren't just being pulled down, they're getting caught in the physical spin of the fluid.
Okay, wait a second. I have to play devil's advocate here on behalf of anyone listening right now.
Please do.
Isn't the AM model just swapping out the mainstream's invisible dark matter or formal radiation for its own invisible medium? We still can't see it. It sounds like, I don't know, a different flavor of an unprovable ghost.
That is a very fair critique. But the paper addresses that exact point through a methodology it calls transparent calibration.
Transparent calibration.
Right. Standard cosmology invents unique, disconnected patches for every new anomaly. The thermal heat slowing down Pioneer has absolutely nothing to do with the rotation of Earth speeding up the flybys. They're separate band-aids for separate problems.
Okay, yeah.
The AM model does the exact opposite. It uses the Pioneer drag and the flyby anomalies to lock in the exact density and the exact circulation rate of this single universal medium.
I see. So it's laying its cards on the table.
Exactly. Once those numbers are locked in from those tiny spacecraft, the model refuses to change them. No more tweaking the decimals. It uses those fixed numbers to make its next predictions.
Which brings us to the ultimate test of scale. If this invisible river governs the tiny movements of metal probes, what happens when we apply those exact same locked-in numbers to massive planets?
This is where it gets crazy. Under the mainstream view, remember, planets orbit because they are trapped in a perpetual freefall.
Right.
Their forward momentum perfectly balances gravity's inward pull, so they fall forever in a circle through an empty void.
But in the AM viewpoint, we go back to the bathtub drain. The planets are massive pieces of driftwood. The sun sits at the center of a vast invisible hurricane.
And this leads to the text's most stunning mathematical claim. The author takes the circulation rate of the medium, which, remember, was calculated only from the tiny velocity shifts of the Earth flybys.
Right. Locked in.
Yes. They apply that circulation rate to the entire solar system. According to the paper, this flow field flawlessly predicts the exact orbital speed of every single planet, from Mercury all the way out to Neptune.
Wow.
The predicted fluid velocity matches the observed planetary speeds to within 0.02%.
To within 0.02% using data from a spacecraft flyby? I mean, think about the implications of that. If that math holds up, it represents a total paradigm shift.
A complete overhaul, yeah.
In the AM model, Kepler's laws of planetary motion aren't independent, mystical truths about gravity. They are just the kinematic description of motion within a fluid. The planets aren't falling. They're floating.
It's a profound reinterpretation. The author emphasizes this isn't a curve fit because the parameters were fixed using only the spacecraft data beforehand. The planets are just acting as buoys, perfectly tracing the current of the solar vortex.
Validating a theory against known planetary orbits is incredible, but a true scientific model has to predict things we haven't seen yet.
Right. Forward prediction.
Does this model actually predict anything new? Let's test that by looking past Neptune into the Kuiper Belt, where the standard model really struggles to explain some bizarre clustering of space rocks.
Yeah, so when mainstream astronomers look at the extreme outer solar system, they see gravitational clustering that just shouldn't be there based on the planets we know about.
Right.
To explain it, mainstream physics invokes undiscovered hypothetical bodies. You've probably heard of Planet 9.
Oh yeah, proposed to explain the clustering of distant icy objects.
Exactly. And then there's a weird 15-degree warp in the mean plane of the Kuiper Belt, observed by Volk and Malhotra back in 2017.
And let me guess, another hypothetical planet.
Yep. To explain that physical warp, another hypothetical body, often called Planet Y, is proposed.
More ad hoc patches. Ghost planets that we haven't actually found yet to explain math that doesn't work. How does the AM model tackle a 15-degree warp in a field of space rocks?
The AM model says no ghost planets are needed. We're dealing with fluid dynamics. The sun's vortex isn't just a flat record spinning. Fluid flows in at the equator and has to flow out somewhere, so it flows out at the poles.
Okay, makes sense.
The paper models the 15-degree warp simply as a shear boundary.
A shear boundary. Give me a visual for that. Are we talking about something like a rip current in the ocean? Or maybe tectonic plates?
Tectonic plates are a great way to picture it. When two massive plates of the Earth's crust grind against each other, they push up a physical mountain ridge.
Right.
In space, the outflowing medium from the sun's poles eventually loops back around and physically crashes into the inflowing medium at the equator. That crash creates a literal physical ridge in the fluid. The space rocks just get caught in that ridge, creating the 15-degree warp.
Like two massive weather fronts colliding.
Okay, but you mentioned predictive science earlier. Did the AM model guess anything before we found it?
It did. In 2019, based entirely on the fluid mechanics of this shear boundary, the AM model published a formal prediction.
It stated, there should be a turnaround zone between 70 and 90 astronomical units from the sun, a specific place where the medium loops back, creating a chaotic gap, followed by a secondary accumulation of rocks.
I am waiting for the punchline here. Did we find it?
We did. 6 years later, in 2025, the Subaru telescope discovered this exact population of rocks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, astronomers found a new outer shell of the Kuiper Belt, right between 70 and 90 AU, separated by a gap. The mainstream model had to scramble to adjust its theories about a larger primordial disk. But the AM model had it formally on the books for over half a decade, based on nothing but the flow of the cosmic medium.
That is the difference between descriptive science and predictive science.
Exactly.
When you rely on ad hoc patches, you are constantly reacting to new telescope data. When you have a unified mechanical framework, you tell the astronomers where to look before they even point the lens.
That's the gold standard.
Okay, so we've gone from a tiny spacecraft near Earth to the dark, distant edges of the Kuiper Belt. Let's take the final leap. Let's zoom all the way out to the edge of the visible universe to tackle the biggest cosmological debate of all the Big Bang and cosmic expansion.
Oh, this is where the models truly wildly diverge. In the mainstream view, the universe is expanding. The primary evidence for this is the redshift of distant galaxies.
Right.
The further away a galaxy is, the more its light is stretched into the red end of the visible spectrum. Standard cosmology interprets this as the actual space between us and the galaxy physically stretching out.
Right. It's essentially the visual version of the Doppler effect,
Yeah.
like a police siren dropping in pitch as the car speeds away from you.
Perfect analogy.
And to explain why this cosmic expansion seems to be accelerating, the mainstream model invokes dark energy. But standard cosmology has hit a brick wall recently, right? The Hubble tension.
Yes. The Hubble tension is arguably the biggest crisis in modern astrophysics. When scientists measured the expansion rate of the universe using the cosmic microwave background, which is the echo of the Big Bang, they get one number.
Okay.
But when they measure it using the light from exploding stars, known as supernovae, they get a completely different number. The standard model simply cannot reconcile why these two measurements of the exact same expansion disagree.
Let me guess. The absolute medium viewpoint has a completely different explanation for redshift.
It does. The AM model argues that the universe isn't expanding at all. It presents a static universe.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The redshift we observe isn't from galaxies flying away from us. It is actually a thermodynamic cooling of light.
Let me stop you there. Are you telling me it claims the universe isn't expanding? That goes against literally everything we learned in grade school. What is thermodynamic cooling of light?
Historically, it was known as tired light. Under the AM framework, as photons, particles of light travel for billions of years, they aren't traveling through empty space. They are pushing through a fluid.
The absolute medium.
Exactly. The paper introduces a variable called photon-medium coupling.
Let's ground that in everyday physics. If I roll a bowling ball down a perfectly smooth, polished lane, it's going to roll a very long way.
Right.
But if I roll that same ball through tall grass, friction steals its energy and it slows down. Are you saying the AM model believes light is basically rolling through tall grass?
That is exactly the mechanism. The medium has a very slight stickiness to it. As light travels, it very weakly interacts with the stickiness, and it slowly loses energy. And in physics, a loss of energy in a photon manifests exactly as a stretching of its wavelength, which is a redshift.
Okay, I follow the grass analogy, but how does rolling a ball through tall grass solve the massive crisis of the Hubble tension?
It solves it by completely reframing the math, leading to what the paper calls the factor of 6.
The factor of 6?
Yeah, to calculate the expansion rate, the Hubble constant, the AM model doesn't look at galaxies at all. It takes the density of the medium, which, remember, it calculated from the Pioneer spacecraft drag near Jupiter, and it multiplies it by the upper limit of the medium's stickiness.
Wait, it's calculating the behavior of the entire observable universe using the physical drag on a single metal probe in our local solar system.
Yes. Using only those two local constraints, the AM model predicts the upper bound of the Hubble constant to be 1,250 kilometers per second per megaparsec. Now, the actual observed rate is about 70.
1250 compared to 70. I mean, to a layperson, that sounds like it missed by a mile. That sounds like a failed equation.
I know it sounds massive, but let's put that in perspective regarding what physicists call orders of magnitude.
Okay.
An order of magnitude is a power of 10. The difference between the size of a grain of sand and the size of the entire Earth is about 10 orders of magnitude.
Wow, okay.
The AM model is attempting to bridge 30 orders of magnitude. It is taking mechanics from a spacecraft a few meters across and scaling it up to the edge of the visible cosmos. To make a jump that incomprehensibly huge and land within a single factor of 6 is considered a mathematical miracle in astrophysics.
Ah, I see. Because the mainstream model struggles with that scale too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Standard cosmology requires fine-tuning its dark energy parameters to dozens of decimal places just to make its own equations balance.
Yeah.
If they change a single decimal point, the whole universe collapses in the math. The AM model bridges the entire universe and lands in the exact right ballpark with zero fine-tuning.
That makes a lot more sense. But what about the Hubble tension itself? Why do the supernova numbers and the cosmic microwave background numbers disagree if the universe is static?
Because in the AM model, the redshift is caused by friction, by that tall grass. And different wavelengths of light simply interact with that grass slightly differently.
Oh.
Exactly. The cosmic microwave background is measured in long millimeter wavelengths. Supernovae are measured in much shorter optical and infrared wavelengths. The tension completely vanishes because you aren't measuring two different expansion rates.
You are simply measuring the slight variation in how different sizes of light waves drag against the universal ocean?
Yes. The variance between the two measurements is only about 8%, which perfectly aligns with a slight wavelength dependence.
It's just breathtaking when you put it all together. Let's summarize the sweeping debate we've explored today from Srimanbaroa's paper. On one side, we have standard cosmology. It presents a universe built on an empty vacuum driven by a magical action at a distance gravity and held together by a collection of disconnected fixes.
Right. Pioneer slows down. Must be thermal radiation. Planets cluster. Let's invent Planet 9.
Yeah.
A warp appears. Planet Y. The universe seems to expand. Dark energy.
And on the other side, the absolute medium framework offers a single unified mechanical postulate. There is no empty space. Everything exists within a flowing fluid.
And from that single entity, everything else cascades without changing the math.
Exactly. The inverse square law emerges from vortex geometry. Spacecraft decelerate because they hit a physical headwind. Planets orbit because they are caught in a whirlpool.
The Kuiper Belt warps because of fluid shear boundaries. And light redshifts because it gets tired fighting the current over billions of years.
It is a profound debate about the very fabric of reality. So the next time you look up at the night sky, I want you to ask yourself what you are really seeing. Are you looking through an infinite, expanding, silent emptiness? Or are you peering through the slow, majestic currents of a vast, invisible river that connects every star, every planet, and every photon in the cosmos?
And if we take this paradigm to its absolute logical conclusion, it leaves us with an incredible thought to end on.
Let's hear it.
If gravity is just the movement of an invisible fluid and spiral galaxies are just weakly coherent whirlpools in this universal ocean, then every single physical action displaces that medium. Could it be that our own everyday movements, a simple wave of a hand or a walking step down the street, are creating microscopic ripples and wakes in this exact same absolute medium right now?